Thanks for joining us for this edition of Next Up. Alvin and I will be interviewing Sergeant Donnell Walters, the president of the Ethical Society of Police, an organization of 250 police officers, most of whom are African American, not all, about 90% or so. Sergeant Walters, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome, sir.
Well, you really made news this past year when you announced, maybe not for the first time, that your organization was in favor of the state taking over local control of the police department. Since 2013, it's been in the hands of the city, but for hundreds of years before that, it was governed by the state. And you'd like Jefferson City to once again be in control of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. Why is that?
Well, it's mainly about management. When we look at organizations and companies, and when there seems to be a failure in certain practices, and let me first say, it's not just about this particular government, local government administration. The organization was not in favor of it when it initially was put on the ballot. And since then, there's been some things, reallocation of funds to things instead of law enforcement. In order for us to be better, we have to be better trained. The way we're better trained is if we have the funds to train. So when individuals who haven't really been involved in law enforcement but only looked at law enforcement from the outside, they have this idea that it can change. And the ways to change it is saying, oh, we can do these things or that thing, those different things. We all Monday morning quarterback all the time. We look at a football game. First thing we say is, why did he throw that pass? If I was in the game, I'd have threw this pass. But we've never played the game on that level.
Well, the last mayor we had who was from law enforcement was Clarence Harmon, and you didn't feel the need to take this step as an organization. I know you weren't the president or director of it going all the way back. So why now? Why this mayor and why this administration?
Well, it has been when we had Mayor Slay was in office, it was a push to go back under state control. And it's just primarily about the management of things. The police board was put in place. We've heard rumors that the board was corrupt. And I strongly disagree. I've been on the department 20 years. I remember the police board. One of the board members was former Judge Betty Battle Turner, who is now the chair for the Civil Service Commission. Very respected, highly respected individual to this day. And so to say that the police board was corrupt and have someone as pristine as her that is set on the board is kind of an insult.
Now, I want to follow up. You mentioned that you were against it when it went on the ballot, but it did go on the ballot, and the people of St. Louis voted to do this. Doesn't it kind of fly in the face of what the electorate of the city of St. Louis wants from their police department?
But when you look at the numbers of how many city voters actually voted for it, it wasn't it was more St. Louis County voters that voted for local control than St. Louis City voters. And a lot of it has to do now, since I've been involved with the different things in politics, it was lobbied a lot harder outside of the city than it was actually in the city.
Now, when it went on the ballot in 2012, it was statewide. Are you here to tell us that the Ethical Society of Police was against local control of the police department as far back as, what, 2010 when it was first suggested?
Yes.
Well, where was that statement at? I just don't recall. I mean, I've been working at the American for a long time, and until you made your press conference, at Jeff City, this was the first I had ever heard that your organization felt that way.
And it has been, because I've even had we have a PR person, and she dug deep and she found some things that we did say, hey, we weren't like all on board for this local control bill. So it is not, again, it's not an attack on the current mayor. It's not an attack. We endorsed the mayor. My organization endorsed the mayor. So it's never been about an attack on the mayor or this administration as it's been put out to be. It is not that. It is the fact that my members, and I have more than police officers. I have park rangers, I have dispatchers, and I have civilian employees. And our civilian employees do one heck of a job working within the police department. And they all said, hey, this is not working for us.
Are some of your concerns that when she first became mayor, Tashara Jones decided not to fill some of the unfilled police positions and instead wanted to redirect that money to social services?
I'm for social services. I really am. I grew up in the city, lived in the city all my life, and I understand the need for our social services. But when that moved to not even try to fill those positions, that is a concern. You know, there's this look of numbers. We hear, oh, crime per capita. That's a number. When you're actually working in these neighborhoods and you actually interact with the individuals who are living behind boards because some individuals broken out all their windows and they want you to do something about it. Those are the individuals that I listen to.
Okay, going back to, like I say, with your decision, now, some of the folks that you are, you know, want to do this, who you were standing with, this is about the only thing I've ever heard them say about St. Louis, and I wouldn't say this was positive, or it might be on your side, but they're very anti-St. Louis, okay? And they're very anti-mayor, and they're very just anti-everything city here and Kansas City. Do you, not that weigh that into your decision, but it's just the optics of that from my side just didn't look good. But you can't be worried about that because, I mean, it's not your job to be worried about that, is it?
Well, I mean, here, we talk about these things, and there's been individuals far greater than me that have stood up against the grain. You know, when you think back when Dr. King and Malcolm X didn't see eye to eye, that didn't, you know, because the Nation of Islam seen things one way, Dr. King saw things another way. So you're not going to always appease everybody. And again, I speak for an organization of people that felt like, hey, if it was just one race over another, I get it. But we're being affected as well. You know, individual officers that look like me, as well as our civilian employees, our park range, they look like me.
But I wasn't talking about race.
No,
I was
I know
talking
you
about
weren't.
politics.
And
I'm talking about the bills that are being passed in Jefferson City are kind of head scratchers up this way, okay? Guns, other issues. And so, all right, if somebody were to say you are siding with that conservative lobby, what is your reaction to that?
I'm not siding with anyone.
Okay.
I'm not siding with anyone.
All right.
And I mean, and a lot of those bills and different things, you read them. They're there to be read. They're there to, you know, when those bills were created, we have state reps, we have other senators that you could write letters to, but you got to honestly think, how many of our citizens really know about those things? How many of us are really involved in politics? Prior to this move for state control, honestly, I never really paid attention to politics. Never paid attention to amendments, legislation, those type of things. Now that I'm seeing how it works, whether this succeeds or fails, I'm still going to be involved.
Well, let me ask about some comments that Jane Duker, the police lobbyist, made that was in this morning's STL Today. She said, well, the progressives won, many of them anyway, in Tuesday's aldermanic election. And some pro-police candidates like Tony Kirshner, who's an employee of the Sheriff's Department, did not win. She said, well, now, this is now more important than ever. Now that the progressives are in City Hall, that we have to have Jefferson City takeover of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. But if the people have spoken by electing those progressives, wouldn't local control be pretty much what the people want?
Well, let's look at 18% of St. Louis voted. 18%.
On Tuesday.
On Tuesday. I have been in some community meetings where we have voters that don't vote because they go, why should I vote? Why should I vote? A lot of our elected officials only come out when it's time to vote. They only hang things on doors when it's time to vote. So you have to realize what stands out to me is 18% of the city voted. 18%.
But you can't void that 18% who
I'm not-
voted.
yeah.
You're saying that the 18% who did vote, it doesn't count because if more people would have voted, it wouldn't have turned out this way. But you can't say that.
I'm not voiding them. I'm not voiding anything. The election process, the election process. I'm not voiding anything.
Except the 2012 vote by the state?
Now, that again, not a void. It's not a void, but if something is not going right in law enforcement, if I was to take, if an individual felt a judgment by a judge wasn't right at the local level, what does he or she do? They appeal. Then they appeal to the higher court. And then if they don't feel that was, they go to the Supreme Court. And it's then the Supreme Court makes a judgment, yeah, the lower courts were correct. This is just an appeal. If the state says and senators say this is not the move to make, then we understand. But we have to appeal to someone. This is not about a protection of the profession. It's about a protection of the people that are in the profession. It is quite often that we look at, even with when Jane Duker spoke about one of the elected aldermen saying, hey, you know, police officers, traffic officers, he stated, should do traffic stops without guns.
That's the newly elected Michael Browning.
Right. So now imagine the tragic day when we had an active shooter inside of a school building and you had an officer out front with no gun. That response time would have been different. It's not, we've had more individuals killed in the line of duty just on a simple traffic stop. Now, individuals that have misjudged and done certain things, that's the individual. But it's not the entire profession. The entire profession is under the microscope. But I have individuals that do this job right every day.
So needless to say, you're against that Browning proposal to disarm officers who are in traffic enforcement.
Very much so.
Well, so am I. I mean, we have discussed it on the show, and everybody says, okay, that's a little bit. And because I think I said on the show before we came on, if we asked him today, are you still standing with that? I think my guess would be that he's not. I'm still going back to, like, people voted progressive, you know, whatever. I just feel as though, I understand that you're representing your organization, but you do feel like you're representing the citizens of the city of St. Louis?
The citizens that I've spoken to,
okay,
and the citizens that support my organization, because I can't speak for every citizen.
Okay, no, that's,
you know, and
I certainly understand that.
I've been to numerous community meetings. I've been to, we have something called Clippers and Cops, where the community comes in and they talk to us. So the individuals that I've talked to, and as a police officer in North St. Louis, the residents that I've talked to, those individuals have given me insight. And so whenever I'm afforded the opportunity, I feel like I can speak for these individuals because they're not afforded that opportunity.
Okay. When the organization was founded, and it states on your website why it was founded, it was quite frankly to deal with discriminatory practices and things like that. Do you feel that still goes on? Is there still a need for your organization, or could it be part of the, you know, St. Louis Police Officers Association?
You know, that's almost like asking, is there a need for the NAACP? Is there a need for any other organization? There's always going to be differences. You know, again, it's working with, when we look at what's going on in Jeff City, it's working with both sides of the aisle. You know, the association has, I understand, has a history, but a lot of that history was due to possibly some individuals, you know, and some people felt like the Ethical Society of Police had some radical individuals. Again, but that was the past. This is now. I'm not doing any of this for press. I'm not doing anything like this to say I'm against a certain group of people. It is because the dues-paying members of my organization felt that something needed to be done. And as the president, it's my job to to try to find a solution to what they feel is a problem.
Let me ask you about working in the city right now, where the pay for a first-year officer has just gone up to $54,000. But in Clayton, it's $68,000 for the first year. And some of the other burbs are even higher than that. And you go to Cincinnati, Columbus, Indianapolis, it's 71. It's about 70 in Cleveland. Why would someone start his or her career in the city of St. Louis at 54? Especially when those other municipalities are all trying to hire. They have the same labor shortage that St. Louis does.
The professional history of St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. I started on this department 20 years ago, way below that. But as I always tell the story, I came on this job liking this job to loving this job, because it's different than those other areas. You're working with people. You know, they work with people too, but it's just a different feeling. It's a different feeling when I'm in the neighborhoods and you get, you know, one of the ladies in the neighborhood just saying, "Hey, I'm glad you're in my block today," and they wave at you. That's just a different feeling. This is the reason why I've stayed 20 years, because I enjoy my job. I enjoy this city, and I could have went to another agency and made more, but it wasn't about that.
I was going to ask you, do you still, I guess, drive? I was going to say walk a beat, but I guess you drive a beat now. Do you still, are you still a street cop?
Yes, I'm a sergeant in the 6th District.
Okay, all right.
So I'm north of Delmar.
Okay, all right. And in, like, say, like in you know, doing your job every day, are you one of the officers, or let me ask that a different way, do you qualify to not live in the city?
Yes.
All right. Do you live in the city?
Yes.
Okay. I actually knew the answer to that question, but I could just, yeah, I'll let you answer it. So you choose to live in the city and you don't have to?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's
yes, I grew
admirable.
I grew up not too far from here on Cook and Whittier, so
okay.
Again, I've watched the city transform, change.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask you about that new rule that allows you to take home your police car. Maybe you already have that because your status, but I think officers now in the city will be able to take the police car home. Is that correct?
That is one of the programs and the incentives that they're putting out there for retention.
And so that'll be a nice benefit, so the police officer won't have to buy a family car. Is that the idea?
It will actually just be a benefit for the officer to and from work. It's actually a benefit for certain neighborhoods. I know when I was on the SWAT team and I parked my car out front, when I first moved on my block, I can remember my neighbors coming and saying, "Hey, we're glad you're on the block." And I have a neighbor down the street, and his name escapes me right now. He puts, you know, the St. Michael's cards in my car. And, you know, it's just, it gives the neighborhood a different sense of security. So they know that there's a police officer living there with them. You know, and again, I came on the job at a different time than a lot of our younger officers. You know, to a time I was renting and then I purchased. So, but I've always just been a city dweller. Mm-hmm. That plus I don't like driving long distances.
New police chief, been on the job, I guess officially, what, 3 months now, or a little bit more, I guess. Have you met him? What are your impressions of him?
I've met him. Mm-hmm. We've had short, candid conversations. We haven't really gotten into the business aspect of it because I understand he still has to learn the upper command as well as the city as a whole. You know, it's different. It's different because when former chiefs have come up through the ranks, they understand the rank and file. Someone coming in, it's just like when Anheuser-Busch got a new CEO. He had to learn the rank or the upper executives before the rank and file. So it is, our new chief is pretty much what I believe to be learning the new, you know, the upper rank. And
well, what do you make of the homicides? As of this week, there are 35 in the city recorded for the first 3 months of 2023, which is 35 too many. But it's actually on a better pace than last year, where we had 200 homicides at the end of 2022. So it looks as though homicides are down in the city.
Again, that is it. The reason behind that, I can't say it's because we got a new chief. You know, it's crime is about opportunity, and the public needs to know if there's an opportunity to commit a crime, it's going to try to get committed. You know, when it comes to our homicide rates, again, opportunity, motive, desire,
Gun laws?
Gun laws. I mean, but again, with the gun laws, even the gun laws being in place, people are still getting guns. Prior to the change in the gun laws, they were still getting guns. They break into people's homes. Many moons ago, I remember we had an individual that lived in North St. Louis that was part of a radical white supremacist group that was storing guns. And some kids broke into it, and luckily the parent said something about it, and we were able to do an investigation, which then found that this individual was part of this organization and was storing guns. So we have people that are gun enthusiasts, and they have them in their home. That's where a lot of the guns come from. People leaving them in their cars, unsecured.
Should that be a crime? We've talked about that on the show, too.
It's technically in our books as like a city ordinance violation that you left a gun unsecured. And it sometimes it is putting some of the responsibility on the gun owner, you know. And so it's, again, the opportunity to commit the crime.
We were talking a little earlier about traffic. They say there's one traffic enforcement officer in all of downtown. Is that enough?
No. No. It's when we look at law enforcement, there's always this vision of crime prevention. Honestly, truly, there's no crime prevention program in the country, if not the world, that is ironclad. Because if it was, guess what? We'd all be following it. It's all about crime deterrence. You know, when you have a force, and I don't want to use the word force, when you have individuals that are there to ensure that laws are not broken, individuals that are motivated to break the law will go somewhere else. Are we moving crime? Unfortunately, yes. But it's depending on if you cover all the corners or cover all the areas that is likely to have crime, crime moves outward.
Literally, I'm enjoying this discussion so much that I'm not like, oh, with 2 minutes left in the show. Real quick, your thoughts on Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner?
I have not said anything negative about our circuit attorney, and that is because that's a different fight. That's not a fight that Ethical has decided to get involved in. You know, Kim Gardner, I'm not a lawyer. This is kind of the input. I feel that any officer that catches somebody should have to go to trial. But I'm a police officer. My job is to catch individuals as well as all the other police officers. They feel like, hey, I done caught this individual, I done got a gun, I done got drugs, this person should go to jail. That's a thought process that we have as police officers. So I can't condemn Kim Gardner or her office. Has some things happen? Yes. Have I gotten like real in depth on her case, her office? No. But it has been said that we've been considered to be flip-flopping. We've been said we're misguided and all these different things, and it's only because we're standing for something different than everybody else.
Now, when your predecessor was on this program, Heather Taylor, just before she retired, she had mixed things to say about the circuit attorney, saying that in some cases, she did walk up cases, good cases, solid cases, she thought, to the circuit attorney's office, and they went nowhere. Did that ever happen to you?
I've not had to take any cases. When I was on the street and I was actually doing police work, mobile reserve, SWAT, we had Jennifer Joyce Hayes. and mostly all of my cases were issued. A lot of cases, I had more cases in federal court than I did in state court, just because of, at the time, the level of enforcement was more so on a higher spectrum of criminals than, like, our officers deal with criminals on various levels. But when you're part of, like, your mobile reserve and your SWAT team, you're kind of directed to go and seek out certain individuals, or should I say, I don't want to say certain individuals, but certain elements of crime.
You mentioned the federal aspect of it. Since Missouri passed this law that you cannot assist the federal officers in, I guess, pursuing gun charges, has that changed your job at all, or is it no impact?
Right now, it's hard to say. I haven't heard any, like, major complaints, because we still have some officers that are detached to DEA, FBI, and so I can't really answer that.
We only have about 10 seconds to go, but do you think that legislation will be passed, signed by the governor, that'll take control of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department out of the hands of the mayor?
I don't know. I don't know. It's a process, and all I can do is wait for the process to go through.
Sergeant Donnell Walters, thank you very much for joining us from the Ethical Society of Police. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.